Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defenses I would start this week. The first one, the Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals last week put in a great effort in their victory to go to 6-0 versus the Cleveland Browns. 14 points allowed, 5 sacks, an interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and if you play fourth down stops, 3 fourth down stops. So this week they got a great matchup versus the Houston Texans that give up the fourth most fantasy points to DST. So right here, Arizona, it's a home game for them, and they're going to tee you off on David Mills in this Houston Texan offense. J.J. Watt, it's a revenge game for him, in my opinion, where he's going to try to get to Mills early and often after the Texans cut him in the offseason, after Watt gave everything he had to that franchise. But obviously they're going in a different direction, and it was a money thing. So I think J.J. Watt has a big game in this one, and I think the Cardinals roll obviously with a huge victory. And I see that DST is one of the best defenses this week here for sure. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them find the end zone. The second defense is the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, they've been pretty solid this season in fantasy football as a defense to use almost each and every week. And the last couple weeks for them, week 4 versus Pittsburgh, 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, an a fumble recovery, 2 fourth down stops. Week 5 at Cincinnati, 22 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions. And last week at Chicago in week 6, 14 points allowed, 4 sacks, an and a fourth down stop. So they got the Washington football team coming to town here as Green Bay. And I think they're going to cause havoc. They're going to get to Taylor Heineke early and often. And we don't know if Antonio Gibson is going to play in this game. Even if he does, he's not 100%. And him and Terry McLaurin, obviously, their top 2 weapons in this offense. So the Packers, they've been playing tight defense the last few games, and they've been playing good, and they should definitely get to Taylor Heineke and this offense a few times in this game. And I think they have a good game and a must-start defense this week. The next defense is the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers early in the week, I recommended them as an ad on the waiver wire. They're still available in about 40% of fantasy leagues, and they got a pretty good matchup on paper this week at the New York Giants that give up the 9th most fantasy points. So for the Giants here, we don't know if Saquon Barkley's going to play. Kenny Golladay as well, we don't know. We know Tani, the impressive rookie wide receiver, has already been ruled doubtful for this week's ball game after tweaking and hurting the ankle once again in last week's game. So right here, the New York Giants, we know Daniel Jones is prone for turnovers in his career, and the Giants' offensive line just isn't that good. So this Panther defense, early in the season, we saw great fantasy outings from them, and the last 2 weeks haven't been that bad as well. Week 5 versus Philly, 21 points allowed, 2 sacks, an a fumble recovery, and a safety. A week 6 versus Minnesota, 34 points allowed, but they still had a fumble recovery, block kick, touchdown in that ball game. And I think in week 7 here, they're going to keep the Giants in the lower 20s or even teens in scoring the football. And I think they're good for a few sacks, a couple turnovers, and they're a good play this week. The next defense is the New England Patriots. So the Patriots versus the New York Jets here in week 7 after a tough matchup versus a very good Dallas Cowboy offense in week 6, where they still made a few plays in that one. 29 points allowed, an a fumble recovery, and 2 fourth down stops. But right here, they got the dream matchup versus the New York Jets that give up the most fantasy points to defenses. So in week 2 versus the same Jet offense, the Patriots defense 6 points allowed, 4 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 2 fourth down stops. So right here this week, I don't know if they'll have that big of an outing like they did in week 2, but they're good for getting to Zach Wilson for a couple turnovers. And I think this defense could find the end zone as well in this ball game. And right now, in my opinion, they are top 3 to 5 defense to start this week, and the 5th and final defense I would start this week is the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens defense, all of a sudden, they're starting to get things together and get things going, especially in that week 6 game where they blew out the Los Angeles Chargers, and that high-powered offense just had no chance in that ball game versus the Baltimore Raven defense. 6 points allowed, 2 sacks, an interception, and 3 fourth down stops in that ball game. And right here, week 7, they got a pretty good matchup versus a division foe, the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think Joe Burrow, he's still a good quarterback, no doubt about it, don't get me wrong. But I think this Baltimore defense, especially at home, they're going to tee you off on Burrow. They're going to make a few plays. They're going to force a few turnovers. And I think they are DST that definitely could get double digits this week. And says I would start here in week 7 of the fantasy football season.